Welcome into Zollypod, episode 5. I'm your host, Preston Moore. I'm joined by my co-host, Carson. Carson, introduce yourself for our listeners.
Hey everyone, Preston. It's great to be back with you discussing all the things that we do on this podcast. We got another interview this week, so we'll get to that later. But Preston, what are we going to get into before we cut to that interview?
Yeah, so this episode is centered on diversity in film. And before we even get into the topic, I feel that we have to address the elephant in the room. You're listening to a podcast hosted by two white guys. That is not lost upon us. We know that, which is why it was super important to us that we get a guest to talk on this topic. So our guest will come into the show a little bit later. We talked to her for a really long time. We had a really great conversation with her, and I'm really excited to share that with you guys. But before we get into it, Carson, I want to talk a little bit about just the logistics of diversity in film and what we've seen over the course of the last decade or so, really the last 5 or 6 years, where diversity has certainly gotten more into the forefront on these studios' minds. Obviously, you're seeing it much more in a mainstream sense. You're seeing a lot more films made by people of color, made by women, a lot more actors, a lot more starring roles, a lot more variety of roles, I would say, as well, in that sense, for more variety of people.
Absolutely. Immediately comes to mind the big Oscar campaign of Everything Everywhere All at Once and the celebration of diversity that that movie is, and especially the career of Michelle Yeoh and that entire cast. It's kind of a parable that the second chances of life and how much they've had to fight to continue on in an industry that continually underrepresents Asian actors, Asian actresses. And that's something we wanted to touch on is sort of in these cultural moments, you know, particularly we've talked a lot about Barbie and Oppenheimer just because it's been the moment of the summer. It's kind of crazy to now look back on it and see that Greta Gerwig is now directed the highest grossing film by a female director, and just how long it took to get that high of a milestone for a big blockbuster. I know Jennifer Lee has directed the Frozen movies. You know, we have Patty Jenkins with Wonder Woman and a couple others up there with the franchise films. Preston, what is on your mind when it comes to this stuff? Like, what are you thinking about? Like, it could be the summer box office. It can just be trends in general that you're seeing. It could be reports that you've read. What's on your mind?
Yeah. You know, what's interesting to me, you mentioned the Greta Gerwig thing, and it's very interesting to me because women haven't necessarily always had a space in film, and frankly, there's a case to be made that they still don't. I think that that's very fair to say. We've got some numbers here, and in 2022, women only directed 15% of theatrical films and 25% of streaming films. It's very much still a male-dominated industry, but it's not just focusing on women in film right now. We're just all diversity as a whole. You mentioned Everything Everywhere All at Once. Obviously, that was a very huge cultural moment, I think, and it kind of piggybacked also in a way off of the success of Crazy Rich Asians. But what is really interesting to me, and I think we saw this with Crazy Rich Asians, and then I think we really saw it come to the forefront, to me at least. I mean, you and I were both very nerdy superhero type people. We love that stuff. And this is kind of where I saw it come to the forefront in terms of box office results, was in Black Panther and then Captain Marvel 1 year later. Because the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the biggest film franchise of all time, Black Panther easily at the time, at 2018, and possibly to this day, was by far the most diverse film on the screen and off the screen, behind the scenes as well, in the history of the Marvel Cinematic Universe by far. And it became one of their highest grossing films. It crossed $1 billion super fast. A lot of it, obviously, just because it was a great movie. I mean, that's not to be lost on us by any means necessary. But at the same time, you saw audiences show out in droves for that movie. You saw audiences who finally were seeing themselves represented on screen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, seeing characters who looked like them, who felt like them, who they could relate to, who had similar upbringings to them. You saw audiences really show out for that in a way that they maybe would not have shown out for other movies.
Yeah, and these audiences have been so underserved, and so when they finally do get a moment, deservedly so, people show up. And I don't know why there was this perception of diverse films not being profitable, but that's literally anything but the truth. When you have just these massive stories to be told from unique perspectives, so fresh, so unique, because you've starved an entire generation, in a sense, of new stories told by people that they can recognize. Even to consider outside of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the cultural moment of Infinity War and Endgame was huge, but just outside of that, or maybe even more, was Black Panther. Everybody was talking about Black Panther. It was a huge deal. It still is a huge deal. And so there's a lot of moments like that happening, but also there's a lot of work to be done behind the scenes. Think about all the executives, all the producers that are traditionally white, male-led people who have been, look at Kevin Feige. I mean, there's no better example of a white nerd who has risen in the ranks and is now in charge of like this entire ecosystem of films. And obviously he's aware of hiring more diverse casts, but it's just crazy to consider like how much there is still left to go. You mentioned that stat of a measly percentage of the top 200 films theatrically in 2022 being directed by women, and it's sad, really. And I think, yes, it's important for the Chloe Zhao's of the world to direct Eternals, to get those big roles, to have Patty Jenkins direct Wonder Woman, but there needs to be a better pipeline to get this talent developed and give them chances. I feel like male directors and writers are given more chances more quickly in their careers. In between when Patty Jenkins won her Oscar, between that and when she directed Wonder Woman, I think there was like 10 plus years in there in between like her major films. And so there's a lot more work for these people to have to like earn these big films, even though they're just as talented and just as invested in their craft. And I think there was this notion going around for a while of like, oh, there's just not enough female directors. It's because they're not being developed and recognized, and there's not being enough effort put into finding these people, number one, and then giving them a chance and making them feel like they can thrive in an industry that has traditionally worked against them. So I think developing talent and giving people chances is key to sort of solving this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I think is really interesting, I'm going to list off some numbers. This is from the UCLA Diversity Report in 2021. And this goes by directors by race or by female directors as well. But first off, directors by race in 2021. And this is why it's important to have diverse boardrooms, as I would like to put it, diverse people in higher up positions, in these exec level positions that can make the calls.
In greenlighting positions.
Right, exactly. This is very interesting to me because in their report, they found that out of films directed by minorities, 40% of those films got under $10 million for their budget. And in films directed by white directors, only 28% had less than $10 million in their budget. But then you look at female directors, and the numbers are even a little bit more staggering because 47.1% of female directed films in 2021 received a budget of less than $10 million. Conversely, the male directed films in 2021 received a budget of less than $10 million, only 28.2% compared to 47.1%.
Wow. And
the opposite of that, only 5.9% of female directed films got a budget of over $100 million, and 10.5% of male directed films got a budget of over $100 million. That's almost twice as many, 10.5% compared to 5.9%. These are really big differences. And so it's not so much of just a social notion, a narrative talking point that people want to push online. There's data that supports this stuff where people are not being given the opportunities that maybe their counterparts are.
Yeah, and the most recent UCLA report reported that streaming content, movies, and TV have been overall more diverse in their casting and representation behind the screen than theatrical, which I think is very interesting to me. I think of someone getting their break on a show and then and our guest kind of mentions this of like the marketing dollars not being spent and getting eyes on those risks, on those shows that do get created. It's like there needs to be a better way to let people know in the drove of content that we live in, when these rare opportunities present themselves, it shouldn't only be that culture knows about the $200 million, the Blue Beetles, the Marvels of the world. It's like we should have a better way of finding out. And quite frankly, the studio should be spending more for people to find these projects, because they are likely to be profitable on the back end because of the lack of this product in the marketplace as a whole.
I agree. And there are numbers that support, we could list numbers all day, but there are numbers that also support that minority audiences can often be the driving factor in box office results. That's something we talked about with Black Panther and all of the results that we've seen. But there are numbers that support even in films that are not strongly diverse films, something like Spider-Man No Way Home, 60% of that opening weekend box office was from minorities. And that's very interesting to me because, that was a movie with 3 white Spider-Man. There's even a joke about it in the movie. I wish there were a black Spider-Man someday.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, wow, shocking. Everybody likes Spider-Man. Yeah, and it took them how long to create the Miles Morales story on the big screen,
right,
to actually get...
We still haven't seen that in live action, which I'm sure eventually in due time we will, once Tom Holland's time runs out, which that's a topic for another episode, obviously. But yeah. I think that all of this leads us really well into our interview. We're going to cut to that interview right now. Our guest is Sharareh Drury. She's an associate features editor at Variety. She's been a journalist over the entertainment industry for quite some time. She's Iranian-American. She had some really great insight on all of this stuff from the journalism side of things as well as from the film side of things, which obviously she reports on in detail and has done so for years. So we're going to cut to that interview right now. We really hope you guys enjoy it. And welcome back into Zollypod. We have our guest joining us now is Sharareh Drury, Associate Features Editor at Variety. Sharareh, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, we really appreciate you coming on. This whole episode, we're talking about marginalized groups in film, and obviously you've covered the entertainment industry for a long time, whether via Variety or The Hollywood Reporter or E! News as well. Tell me a little bit about, I guess, your background, your experience as it pertains to the topic.
Yeah, of course. So I actually got my start in journalism way back, growing up in Memphis, Tennessee, as an Iranian-American kid who was like obsessed with the news and like a post 9/11 world. I could have gone through so many different routes to get into this career, but as weird, maybe not as weird as it sounds, but 9/11 really was the reason why I got into it. And you would think that would have meant I would have gotten into like hard news. I would have gone to work at CNN or something like that. But essentially my father was in the World Trade Center on 9/11 and he got out. And then in high school, I did a documentary about that. And that kind of just launched my whole passion for storytelling. And then the more and more I got involved with journalism going into college, I went to USC Annenberg. Right away, I kind of noticed Annenberg is a very diverse school. There was a lot of diversity in my classes, but I still felt like stories of essentially marginalized people, whether it's people of color, the LGBTQIA community, disabled people, anyone that is essentially just an underrepresented group, I felt for them because I myself identify with a few of those groups. I mean, I'm Iranian Irish. My mom immigrated here from Iran. I'm bi myself. So these are things I was like, maybe there's a way for me to connect some part of that identity and that passion into my reporting. I was still very into hard news throughout most of college. I absolutely thought I was going to be like a broadcast reporter and like be the next Christiane Amanpour. I was like, I'm going to follow in her footsteps. That's exactly what I thought I was going to do. I got an internship opportunity to work with E! News. And I was like, this is interesting. I kind of watch E! sometimes. So let me see if this would be of interest. So, and that's the whole point of doing internships, obviously, in college, is to kind of see what you like the most. I quickly realized how I could kind of combine a few different things. I could combine my passion for telling stories, my passion for spotlighting marginalized groups and underrepresented groups, and also pop culture, which is a huge personal passion of mine. I love film, TV, games, comics, anything in that realm. And that is kind of what's guided much of my career and a lot of the work that I have done. I first started at E! News. I've also been the editor-in-chief for Culturist. I've worked for The Hollywood Reporter. I've worked for Variety. And basically in every single job I've had, been a big goal of mine is to spotlight stories that maybe don't get told as much or help shine a light on groups that don't get their stories told as much. Just because, I mean, I'm Iranian American myself. I don't see a lot of myself represented in media. It's getting better, but we say that all the time. I think in this industry, it's getting better, but there's still so much work to do because when you think about it, the majority group, essentially white actors and actresses in Hollywood, they have had a massive lead on everybody else. So while it might seem like certain groups are getting more representation, there's still so much work to be done. And that's not to say that it can't ever be accomplished, but there just is a lot of work to be done. That's kind of a big part of my goal in working on the journalism side of it, is to help uplift those stories when that work is being done, and also to spotlight it when it's not and what could be done better. So that's a little bit about me and the work that I do.
It's really interesting, and it's clear that through your work, anyone who has seen your articles or read your articles or seen the work that you've done over the years, it's clear that your identity is at the forefront of almost all of your work. And I think that that's really impressive. Talk a little bit about why that's important to you. You mentioned how you felt as an Iranian American, you're not represented much in the media. Tell me a little bit about that and what that means to you and how you try to implement that in your work.
Of course. So again, I think a lot of people who I guess would identify with my generation. I mean, I'm a millennial. I don't know if I'm like an elder millennial. I was born in 88. But I mean, I like so many people I feel like who are between their 20s to mid to late 30s were kind of this, I guess it's like that post 9/11 generation where like 9/11 was like the biggest news event that happened for us. It was, in terms of, if we look at different generations, like for my dad, it was when JFK was shot. For us, it was 9/11 and those attacks. And everyone remembers where they were when it happened, what they remember. And it has impacted everything, not just in this country, but the world. It's crazy to think this, but it has impacted everything, even into media. Because, you know, for me growing up in the South, pre 9/11, I knew that people didn't like other people because of the way they looked or the way they talked or anything like that. But it had not really affected me that much. I mean, granted, I was only like in the 6th or 7th grade when 9/11 happened. So not much maybe would have happened to me by this point that I would have noticed. But literally the day after 9/11, I was being bullied. I was being pushed around. People would call me terrorist and camel jockey. And I got thrown in trash cans in high school. It was ridiculous. And initially I didn't understand it. My parents, you know, would try to explain to me as a kid, like, here's why people are being mean to you and stuff. And I was like, I don't understand, because I literally like the same things as everyone else. I was like, I like Dragon Ball Z as much as my friends do. Why, why is everyone hating on me because I, you know, I have tan skin or darker hair? I don't understand it. Obviously, as you get older, you start to understand why people have the hate that they do. Not that it makes sense, but you understand like maybe where it's coming from a bit. And I started to see that trickle into media. Pretty much every action film, adventure film that had to deal with the military going overseas or fighting some foreign enemy, it was always someone in the Middle East, or I like to say West Asia. Like it was always some terrorist from like Saudi Arabia, or especially Iran,
Right.
Or Iraq, because of like what had happened with Iran or Iraq, you know, in the 70s, 80s, 90s. It hit so close to home because my mom literally left Iran during the Iranian Revolution. All of that hits so close to home. So like if all you grow up with is the only time you see a person that slightly looks like you or looks like your family, and they're being portrayed as a terrorist, it's not very uplifting. I remember when I was in high school, I was a part of a theater and television program at Germantown High School where I went to, and it was an incredible program. And we did incredible musicals that would cost like $50,000 to $100,000 to put together at this high school. It was an amazing program. I really wanted to be in theater because I saw how much fun it was. I didn't go that route because I basically was like, I can't do this because I don't see anyone that looks like me. As a kid, I literally thought, even if I got into acting school, went to Hollywood or went to New York to work on Broadway or something, I'm always going to be terrorist number 3. Like no one's going to want me to do anything. And that unfortunately still impacts so many young people today who want to go into this industry, whether it's, you know, they want to go into acting or even do what I do as journalism. It's like they just feel like I can't make it because I don't see that. So that is why representation is so important. And for me, it impacted me so much growing up because I just didn't see it. And now I do think, honestly, in the last, I'd say like 5-10 years, I've started to have a little more hope. Like I see more Iranian actors getting roles. And the most important thing I will say is this: is it's not just like whether you're Iranian or you're Mexican or you're Chinese and you're seeing yourself represented. I love when I see like an Iranian actor just playing a person, just
Mm-hmm.
going through regular life, doing regular things. Yes, their culture is kind of important to their character, but the reason I say that is how many stories do we see all the time where it's a white actor or actress? We don't know anything about where they were born, if they're Swedish or Hungarian background or anything like that. Like none of that matters. It's more
Yeah.
like what's the rom-com story about or what's this horror movie about. But every single time it's like a character of color or if they're gay or anything, it's like it's such a massive part of their character. And I think sometimes that does make sense, but I also would just love to see people of color and marginalized people in entertainment just being like just going through a regular story or a
Mm-hmm.
kooky story or whatever it is, but it's like their race or their sexuality doesn't have to define every single action because I'm Iranian American. I don't walk around every day eating kebab. Okay. Like that's not like I love it.
Yeah.
Love to eat, love me some hummus, but like I am not doing that. Like I have pizza waiting for me after this. That doesn't like impact me every single day. And I feel like that's also what gets a little frustrating in media is it's like if you see, a person of color, they have to be eating their food of their culture. They have to be speaking in another language. I get it, but so often I feel like that's because the people who are writing those characters probably aren't that background. And they're
Mm-hmm.
like, let's write it this way because it makes them more interesting. And it's like, no, like they could just be interesting on their own. And it doesn't have to be a big part of their character. So yeah. Sorry, that may have been a long-winded answer. But
No, that was
yeah.
great. That made me think about just like how much of an uphill battle it is to establish a point of view that's beyond what people's, especially like white executives,
Yeah.
conceptualize groups of people as like interesting
Yeah.
stories. One of the things that we can kind of touch on is people that do make it. I'm reading through the 2022 Inclusion Impact
Yeah.
Report you contributed to for Variety right now, and there's so many people on here that are very famous people. But I think about even the people that make it have a lot of a burden on
Yeah.
them to sort of proliferate the rest of the industry to make change. Like in 2020, all the heat that John Boyega got for like just going out and protesting like everybody else,
Yep.
and the sort of rhetoric around that he was like this volatile performer, even though he was literally in Star Wars
Yep.
and one of the most up and coming actors of his generation. And so I think there's a lot of stuff to talk about with people making it, but then not necessarily being in positions of power. And so
Yeah.
that's why I think it's important to highlight people who are starting production companies, who are sort of
Yes.
creating roles for people of color to come in and tell those stories without the stressors of these white executives coming in and trying to mold a story into something it's not.
Absolutely. So USC Annenberg has like this inclusion initiative that they do, and they're consistently putting out a lot of studies and research exploring basically underrepresentation in Hollywood. And I think I remember from a year or two ago, they were discussing, okay, yeah, like there's been like some progress that's happened, like for example, with gender, with female led films, female directed films. But at the end of the day, it's such an uphill battle because these women could be directing films or creating avenues for other women or other people of color or whatever it is to come through. But at the end of the day, these things need funding, they need support. And it's crazy that they don't get it as much, I guess, yeah, as like a white majority would. Because the other thing too is I think in that same year when that study came out, I don't think anyone could really argue with this. Diverse films do well at the box office. People
Mm-hmm.
like to see them because, shocker, we want to see ourselves represented. We want to see our stories told. We'll go out in droves to see it. We'll get our communities to see it. But then they also just generally do well. It's some kind of very confusing, situation in Hollywood where it's like these stories do well. So why aren't you funding them? Why aren't you supporting them? And I think kind of what we touched on a second ago, I just don't know if it's that, again, mostly white male executives, but it can be white female execs too. Maybe to some degree they don't quote understand what these stories are trying to do. They try to change and shift them. They want to make them maybe more pleasing for a wider audience, I guess. But it's crazy because you think of like a film like Crazy Rich Asians, that I don't know a single person that didn't see that film, or Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Hmm.
It was such a great film. And yes, it touched on the Asian American experience, but it was also just an amazing sci-fi film and a weird film. I watched that film knowing that it was going to touch on a bit of culture and identity and things like that. But I just remember the second I saw the trailer, I was like, oh, this is just like a weird sci-fi film of some kind, and I want to watch it. And a bunch of other sci-fi people or people who love multiverse kind of films, they went to go see it. And it just so happens to have a large Asian cast, but like it did well. And you can rinse and repeat that. You could have like more diverse casts doing films that white casts have been doing forever, and they're going to do well. It just stinks that they don't get financial support, marketing support. That's the other big thing too, is it could be a really great film and maybe it gets the green light. You have to support it all the way through.
Hmm.
Give them good marketing, push it through festivals, put out enough campaigns and ads across social media. I'm not an expert on box office, but I think that was why some people felt like maybe Little Mermaid did not do as good as it could have done, because I loved it, watched it, thought it was amazing. But there was unfortunately, so much ignorant backlash about the casting of it. And I don't know what more could have been done to have helped that film, but I just feel like I didn't see enough about it as much as I would have liked. And so there's things like that you have to wonder, do certain films maybe, even if they get the green light, are they just not getting enough support as, say, a white majority film would get to?
Right. One thing that you touched on that's interesting to me is having people from marginalized groups not necessarily on the screen, but also behind the scenes, executives, producers, people who are a part of making these films, these television shows happen. Because as the general audience, what we see, we see the Riz Ahmeds, we see the John Boyegas, we have these figureheads, the actors, the stars who are on screen, obviously. But a lot of what happens in Hollywood, the actors don't actually have control over as much as the people behind the scenes. And that's something that we're kind of seeing now with obviously the ongoing strikes with the WGA and SAG-AFTRA. But what I want to ask you about, I guess, is in light of the strikes, I guess this is a pertinent question.
Yeah.
How do you think the importance of having marginalized groups or more diverse groups in the boardrooms and on the screens as well, how important do you think that is, making sure that there's diversity in all factors of it, not just on screen where everybody sees?
It's so important because I liken it to even like what I've dealt with in the newsroom. So I'll kind of put a similarity there in that I'm an associate features editor. I've been an assignment desk reporter. So I'm kind of like in this beginning to middle tier. Maybe I'm humbling myself a bit, but like I feel like I'm in the middle tier, I guess, of like staffing in a lot of the places that I've worked. I've only been an editor in chief one time, and it was for Culturist. And, that was a important, but, a smaller publication. When I've worked in these middle tier things, or if you're an actor or someone who's maybe not a Tom Cruise level person, there's only so much influence and impact that you have. You want to see people that look like you and are doing things for your community at the top, because they understand your struggle. They will probably be more inclined to look at your pitches, to give you funding, to help you. That makes sense. Honestly, every single newsroom I've worked in, it's been, I gotta say, 75, probably more like 80, 90% white.
Mm-hmm.
And that impacts so much. I know this is leaning more towards journalism, but I think it's linked to media and Hollywood overall, because if the majority of the people that are working in a studio or a company, or for me, like in a newsroom, are majority white male or white male and female, at the end of the day, they can really only go off of their own experiences that they've ever had and their understanding of things.
Mm-hmm.
A great example I'll bring up is back when we were having a huge surge of Black Lives Matter protests and Stop Asian Violence, Stop Asian Hate. When that was happening across newsrooms, it really put a lot of pressure on reporters and editors of color, because we truly understood what was going on with this movement and what needed to be covered. And then you have people who could just have no understanding of what it means to go through these things. And the really shitty thing with that, and part of my language, the really difficult thing with that is it adds so much pressure on you because now this is like, I think, such a common experience with people of color. Now you have to be the explainer.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have to be the mascot. Now you have to like let everybody know how to write about things, how to talk about things. I felt like that. I have felt like that in so many newsrooms discussing, how we can cover Iranian Americans in film, certain language you should be using, certain language you should not be using. When discussing the Middle East, immediately, unfortunately, when you see things like Middle East in the headlines, it has a negative connotation. It really sinks when you kind of have to be the explainer. It's like an added job on top of your job that you already have. So if you take that into Hollywood, if you're an actor of color or if you're a gay actor or a disabled actor, you already go through enough just being underrepresented and trying to break through more barriers than other people. So you're already doing enough work,
Mm-hmm.
both physical work and mental, emotional work, and you're not getting paid as well. All of those things are already just impacting you day to day. And now you have to try to fight, not just for yourself, but like a whole community. And that's the hard job, honestly, for the people who do make it up the ladder, is you need to make sure that you're leaving steps behind for other people to climb up behind you. It's called like the whole like missing stair thing, where as you move up, you need to make sure that other people can follow you
Mm-hmm.
and go through. And so the thing that I think can suck is when you do have people who make it up to the top and they're not doing that. They're not helping their community. They've gotten to their seat of power and they're like, I'm good, I'm fine. And you see that a lot in Hollywood. I won't get into it, but there's quite a few actors that'll probably get criticized for not helping their specific communities, not maybe uplifting their community and giving it the support that they need in the industry. It's a very difficult battle because you want to see people from these different communities get those positions of power, but it's also kind of tough because they're very likely going to be like the one Latino in the room, the one Persian. I've pretty much have been either one of the only or one of very few Middle Eastern people
Mm-hmm.
in a newsroom. And I'm like, anytime there's ever any story that touches on that entire region in newsrooms I've been in, they'd be like, oh, well, Sharareh can handle it. And I'm like, I'm not a UN ambassador for the Middle East. I don't
Mm-hmm.
understand everything that goes on over there and should not be my job to. And it's the same thing for actors of color. It sucks that they probably feel like they have to be a representation of that community, and no white actor has to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry, that might have been a little bit of a ramble again, but it is frustrating because whether you're middle tier up to the top, it's frustrating because not that many of us get to those positions. And you're always going to be doing more labor and more work than basically your white counterpart because you've gotten to the top and you can't just sit there like they are and just do basic work. You've got to be constantly thinking about, okay, like how can I bring basically other people like me up as well, which we all should be doing. That's what we should be doing. It just thinks that has to be an extra task that is
Right.
on us because of the systems that have been put in place.
It's such a weird line to walk between all of a sudden something becomes popular in the news and then they turn to you as all of a sudden, well, now we want your
Yeah.
perspective. And
You
it's
didn't
like,
want it before.
wow, well, what about all these other years
Yeah,
I've been here?
exactly.
With that being said, kind of switching up a little bit, is there any projects, like what are you watching right now? Like just like fun projects to shout out, like people that you're. Yeah, we'll switch it up to do a more fun question. I'm like, what are you watching right now? What's on TV for you at night? I just wanted to give you a chance to, or maybe there's like an article that you haven't got to write
Yeah,
this
of
year that you're
course.
like, oh my gosh, I just dying to talk about this. Is there anything like that you want to
Yeah,
mention?
sure. So actually one TV series I just finished up. I got the screeners for it, so I don't know if it's like officially fully aired everything out, is Foundation. It's a really cool sci-fi series on Apple TV. I really like that show. One, I'm just a big sci-fi nerd. If it has to do with space, aliens, any kind of that stuff, I'm into it. I also love like horror. I love weird nerdy stuff. Like I'm a big anime fan. So like any of those,
Me
that's
too.
what I'm into. So Foundation, I recently watched. I hadn't seen the first season when it first came out, and so the new season I just watched it. And what I actually really appreciated about it is it was a very diverse cast in a lot of different ways. I felt like it was diverse. There were different people of color across the film. You had a lot of LGBT relationships throughout the film, different types of relationships, whether super serious or not. I also just liked it because they kind of touch on the fact that, like, yes, planet Earth used to exist a long time ago. And I think they slightly touch on the fact that way back when on this planet Earth that existed, whatever, thousands of years ago, there were issues between people for certain things. But I kind of like that we're so far in the future now that at least those issues don't matter anymore. There are still issues. There's like power play, there's obviously like class issues that are happening, there are issues between different worlds, there's something like that going on, but it's not about like, oh, you're gay, or oh, you're this type of race. Like, those aren't there. And I gotta say, when I watch shows like that, it's relaxing, because I do love a show or a film that'll touch on those intelligently, but they have a smart conversation about race, about culture, about stereotypes. I don't mind when films and shows touch on those, but again, if that's the kind of thing that you just deal with personally all the time, you want an escape. This is why I watch junk like Real Housewives. I'm like watching Salt Lake City right now, and I'm like, I just love it because it's chaotic. I can't relate to a single one of these women because they're all like ridiculously wealthy and over the top, but we all need our escape in some form, and entertainment is an escape, right? That's what shows like Real Housewives and like Married to Medicine, those things are for me. But I'm just giving a shout out to Foundation because it's a show that I recently watched where right from the first couple episodes I was like, oh, it's so diverse, and like I see people that look like me or like look like my friends and stuff, but that's not a big part of the story. It's more just about the fact that they're people in space and they're flying around in space and having issues with each other for completely different reasons. So yeah, that's one show that I recently watched. I also just got the screeners for the new Walking Dead show, Daryl Dixon. I'm a huge Walking Dead fan. I was loyal to the end. I know some people didn't like it, but I love The Walking Dead. And so I watched the Maggie and Negan show that recently came out. I thought it was okay. I liked it. I mean, I love me some Jeffrey Dean Morgan, so I was like, I'll watch it. But like, I have to say, I'm not going to spoil anything for the Daryl Dixon show. I know I probably can't because it's not fully even aired. I think only 1 or 2 episodes have come out. I will say though, for people loved like classic Walking Dead horror, you're going to get it in this show. It's so good. I love what they do with the character. I love the fact that we get to see the whole zombie walker apocalypse in a completely new setting. Because I think that's why people got kind of tired of The Walking Dead. There's only so much like Virginia southern backwoods that we can see in The Walking Dead. Like,
yeah, I think I bowed out after like season 6 or season 7.
Like,
I can't remember.
That's the thing, is the setting is so important with these. And the same thing also, it's just like the zombies weren't very scary anymore. So, you know, but I know I can say this because the final season of The Walking Dead, the original series, ended. We are starting to get variants in zombies, so I'm glad they started doing that, because at some point, like, the zombies are slow. Like, they're not scary. You could build a tree house and you'll win. Like, that's what I never understood. Like, a few seasons into this, I was like, just build treehouse like land. Like, just do that, or live in tall buildings and get rid of the stairs, and they won't be able to get to you. It's not that hard. But now
you solved The Walking Dead in like 3 sentences. They should have, if they only had you around.
I'm just saying, if Rick Grimes had me on his team, like, I would have handled this so quickly. But like, and that's, I don't know. So that's what I do like about some of these new series, like the Negan one with Maggie and the Daryl Dixon one, is we're getting, you know, different types of zombies. We're getting new set. Like the Negan one was cool because we went to New York City. Like, that was incredible to see it. And I think that's what we need to see. If Walking Dead wants to, I know they're trying to do shows, now they're going to do films. That's, I think, what's going to make it successful, is if we get into basically different environments. So yeah, the Daryl Dixon one is, I'll give a big shout out for that. It's a big thumbs up for me because it was so cool to see like France in a post-apocalyptic world. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, we really appreciate you coming on, Sharareh. Thank you so much again for joining the show. We really, really appreciate it. Appreciate all your insight on all of that stuff.
Thank you guys so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about it. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And before we let you go, if any of our listeners want to find you on social media, where could they do that if they wanted to?
Just hit me up on Twitter. I'm at Sharareh Drury. I can't even pronounce my own name. SHARAREHDRURY. Just hit me up on the Twitterverse or X, whatever Elon Musk wants to call it. It's still Twitter.
It's Twitter as far as I'm concerned for now. Well, once again, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that will do it for this episode of Zollypod. We really appreciate you tuning in. We hope that you enjoyed our interview with Sharareh Drury. She had a lot of really interesting insight, a lot of great stuff, Carson, that I really appreciated hearing. It's something that obviously you can know about, but if you haven't experienced it, you simply haven't experienced it on this topic. And that's something that you and I can both relate in that way. We haven't experienced a lot of the things that we're talking about in this episode, which is why I think it was really important to get Sharareh's insight on all of this. Someone who not only is Iranian-American, but also someone who knows the entertainment industry better than most people.
Absolutely. And that's sort of one of the things we're proud to bring on this show is diverse perspectives and people in all parts of the industry that can provide viewpoints that we simply cannot get because we did not experience them. That's sort of been hopefully the goal of bringing more guests on like this, people working from journalism to entertainment all the way into the sets of movies and TV shows, that we can bring you these interviews and get their perspectives. That being said, if you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Wherever you get your podcasts, Zollypod on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get it. Preston, where can the people find you on social media before we sign off here?
If the people want to find me on social media, my social media is at Preston, the letter C, More. So at Preston C, More. That's my username on all social media. Hope you find us there. Like we mentioned, Zollypod, at Zollypod on all of those social media as well. Carson, where can they find you?
You guys can find me over on Twitter, Letterboxd, wherever you talk about movies, at The Film Carson. Talking all things, plug in the next episode of Zollypod, whatever else I'm talking about. Lots of cool movies coming out soon. Excited to talk about maybe some of them. Gonna have my tickets booked for The Creator, the new Gareth Edwards sci-fi movie. Super excited to see that opening night. But yeah, that's about it for me.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really excited to dive into all the upcoming movies on the fall slate and then get into winter as well. Thank you for listening to this episode of Zollypod. Once again, if you'd like to follow us on social media, we are at Zollypod, spelled exactly as it is spelled in the name of the podcast that you're listening to right now, whichever platform you may be listening on. If you haven't turned our notifications on, subscribe to our podcast, any of that good stuff, please do so. We're so excited to bring you more episodes in the future, and we're excited to bring on more exciting guests in the future who can provide, again, insight that Carson and I can't provide. That's the point of this show. But as for this episode of Zollypod, that's all we have, and we will see you next time, and we will see you at the movies.